I turned to my sister-in-law and I said, this plane's going down. When we hit, it took the floats off.
You hit the mountain.
Hit the mountain. It rips the floats off, and thank goodness, that's the gasoline. And so we skidded 1,200 feet, and then gravity pulled us down 1,800 feet.
So you landed on top of a cliff?
If the plane wouldn't have taken that turn and slid back, like sideways down, we would have gone over that cliff of 1,800 feet. We would have never survived that.
Marci, thank you for being here, first of all.
Of course.
So we're going to have a few things to talk about from my understanding, my limited understanding, because I didn't ask too many questions. That's how I like to operate.
Right.
So we're going to tap into you losing your mother and some other stories within that experience, which will lead us to a plane crash that you and several other people survived.
Yes.
Okay, that's definitely a new one for Dead Talks, talking about plane crash survivors.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you again for being here. And if you want to start, thank you. And do you want to start with your mother?
Well, I'm from Las Vegas, and my mother was, she had 6 children. And back in the day, they didn't know, about gestational diabetes, but she had gestational diabetes, and it destroyed her kidneys. And so when I was 10, she was sick for 6 years. I think the birth of my younger sister was what really, but anyway, she died when I was 10. Wow. So, it's different. Death, however it comes, it's never expected, but we knew she was sick for a long time. She was actually the first kidney dialysis patient in Nevada. So, we had kidney machine there in our home. And so we were very aware, but it's still shocking when it happens. So.
Right. So she was sick for a while, but there was no anticipation that she was going to die.
No, we were just hoping that she would get better. And she was actually on her way. They felt that she was ready for a transplant. It would have been one of the first that they had done. And then she just took a turn for the worse.
Okay. And that was quite some time ago. You said you were 10?
It was at Christmas. And I believe she was going to be 41. She's quite young.
And besides all the stuff that comes with grief, of course, I mean, feel free to tap into how that broke through. But
well, it's interesting that our family, we never talked about it. We never talked about, the whole process. I think, I don't know if it's because we were preparing this whole 6 years for her not to live. But honestly, once she passed, her things were moved out. We didn't talk about it as family members. We were raised on the same street as my grandfather and grandmother, her parents, and it just wasn't discussed about the feelings, the grief, the sadness, and I always thought how strange that was. And so now I'm getting emotional, but for years, could not even talk about it. Without just, I can even say my, mom, without just overwhelm grief. But that's, of course.
Well, I see you clearly getting emotional now about it. So where are you now with it? Because it seems like you do get triggered when you just mention your mom. So is that something have to do with not speaking about it early on?
What's interesting is I went to a lot of therapy for a lot of variety of reasons. I have a very rich history of life and experiences, and I've done a lot of different things. And after the plane crash, they sent me to therapy, but I realized that it's more about the relationship I had with my husband at the time. It wasn't really that I had this severe head injury, and going head first basically into a mountain. But I could never, I couldn't understand why my siblings didn't have and experience that grief. Just, top of the head to the tip of, what's happening now. I can't even get the words out right. And then I finally about, let's say 15 years ago, went to a therapist, and, she touched on something. And she said, the reason, I was telling Tara, I only have 5 memories of my mother. Because of the plane crash, I have short-term memory, and most of my life before the airplane crash is gone.
Wow.
So I don't have memories of my mom. And she said, that's what you're grieving, is that your siblings have all of these memories, but you have none. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
So
how do you work through that? So you only have that's a new one for me to hear in regards to, that's very hard to not have to go back to memories of.
Well, how do I work through it? I just, I guess my daughter, I work through with my daughter. My daughter is gifted in that she talks to dead spirits.
So is she a medium?
I don't know. What would we call her? I don't know.
She's naturally working her way.
Yeah. She's very young. Very young. She had a friend called Bob. And I have to tell you, I had an experience. I was telling Tara on the way here that it was very, very unfortunate with a bad spirit. And so.
On the way here?
No. When I was young.
Okay.
And so I would just say no, like scary movies, no, nothing that had to do with the occult, nothing. And I really I don't want to have visitation. I don't want to dream about my mom. My siblings would talk about dreaming about mom, but I was like, no. So I really pushed that away. And then when Alex was talking about her friend Bob, and I'm like, who is this Bob person? And it probably took her, she was brave enough, maybe when 7 years, so she would have been about 12, that she says, I see grandma. And I was like, grandma, she only has one grandma, not my mother, but her grandma Valine. That was my husband's mother. And she's like, no. She says, I know your mother, Grandma Wendelboe. And I was like, how? Because we don't talk about my grandma or her grandma, my mother. We just don't. It was a pattern that was set when we were as soon as she died. Mm-hmm. And so through her, I've really come to know who she is, know that she's okay, that she, that really life does go on. And that she's with my father.
What is that adjustment? Because when that happened, did you believe it immediately, or was there a process?
I tested her. I really tested her. And because I'd never been around anybody that had ever been able to do anything like that. But a lot of different things that happened, and I would ask her questions, things that she would never even have any knowledge of.
What kind of questions?
Questions about the early life of my mom and my dad.
So you'd ask her specific questions about the early life of your mom and dad?
Where do you think their favorite place was? And she'd say the ocean. Huh. They met in Beverly Hills.
No hesitation, first answer.
No hesitation. She says the ocean. She says that's their favorite spot.
And this is at 12?
Yes.
So once you started answering questions like that, you're like, this has, how else would she know this?
And then there was an instance that happened with her boyfriend. And she came to me and she says, her boyfriend's father died. And she said, Alex's dad came to me. Her name's Alex and his name was Alex, and wants me to tell Alex. Alex is really grieving and really he's just not, his father died of liver cancer. And he says, but his father has told me to do something. And I said, well, Alex, this is how you're going to really find, in my head. And I said, you have to have faith in your gift. I call it a gift. And I was pregnant with her when I was in the plane crash.
Oh, wow. So
I don't know if something, so that's why do you see the connection? I said, this is how you're going to find out if what you believe you're getting from people and seeing and all the things is you're going to tell Alex to do this. And if it comes to fruition and it's true, then you'll know that what you have experienced your life is true. And it's not, because sometimes she feels like she's what's the word? I lose my words because of my brain injury. I'm sorry. Okay. But not not hallucinating, but that, what?
Imagining.
Yeah, imagining that it's not real. She was worried that it wasn't real.
What was that?
That when she talks to spirits, when she sees people. And, she says, am I just hallucinating? Am I, because her father had mental illness. And so, the kids were aware of what was going on with their father. So she was afraid that maybe something like that was happening.
Wow.
And I said, well, you have to tell Alex. what his father said. And if those things are true, then, you'll know. It's kind of her
validating.
Validating, yes. And so she did, and it was. And so.
What did she tell her boyfriend?
The father came and said that when he was young, him and his, they call him Uncle Dan. It was a family friend named Dan, but they called him Uncle Dan. And the Uncle Dan and him wrote letters to it just gets me every time, into their future sons. And he had these letters in a tin can in a tree. And so he asked, said, ask Alex to go to this tree and dig this up. And there's going to be this tin box there. And the letters are there. And this will give him some closure and some peace. And so she came to me and she's like, what if he digs up and he can never find the letters? She was worried that it would destroy their relationship.
Right.
And I said, well, his father came to you and said, you have to do this. And I always believe that if you get a prompting from the spirits or whatever, that you have to do what they say. And because gifts are given and gifts are also taken away as equally as fast as they're given. And I said, so, you don't have to, but I think you should. So she told Alex to go and under the tree and told him specifically where to go. And the tin box was there with the letter inside.
Oh man! So what happened to the boyfriend once you?
So he read it. He said he came back and he was like so nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, what if I'm nervous for her, but then I wanted. It's not that I wanted her to have this gift, because it did bring me comfort to know that she had this special relationship with my mother. I wasn't receiving anything from my mother since the plane crash, but it just brought me comfort that, because my children, they don't know their grandmother. They don't, they just don't, because I don't have any memories to share with them about their grandma. So it felt good that at least she had a special relationship with my mother.
Right.
But she told Alex he found it, and he was just like, I can't believe that you knew. How did, And then she said, she didn't say your father had come to me. She's like, Alex, I think you would need to do this, 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 and this. And he said, how did you know to send me there? And then that's when he said, your father came to me and told me.
That's remarkable.
Yeah.
That's, out of all the stories, I've heard a lot of amazing stories, and from Tara, who's to my right. I brought this up before in other episodes, because when I put a lot of these stories out there, because I find them so fascinating, and I want people to form their own opinions. And, the big question comes like, show me proof, show me proof. It's like, this is still an anecdote, and I'm sure there's plenty of people that are going to have their reasons for not believing it. But when you hear something like that, it's like, what do you say to that? You can't deny that. And after that, and I've had very troubled marriages, and I would, I have to be careful, because I never felt like it was proper for me to go to Alex and say, what is my mother think about this? Or what is my mom, da-da-da. And I felt like if my mom thought it was important enough to tell Alex something to give me comfort, that she would come to me and tell me. So I've always respected that space, I guess, about that. So where do all these experiences tie in with? I'm curious. This is all interesting, but the plane crash. You said that, was there something in regards to your mother coming to you, or something, or to your daughter, and then we get to the plane crash? Like I said, I was pregnant with Alex. Come a little closer to the mic, if you don't mind. Like I said, I was pregnant with my daughter, Alex. And I lost my first baby when I was first married to her father. And so I'd had a miscarriage. I knew what happened. I knew the signs. I knew all of these things. And my first husband was a commercial fisherman up in Alaska. And you see the deadly at sea, or what, first catch. They're a different kind of fishermen. They fish and they hand pick the fish out of the ocean that are caught into the net. They're called set netters. And so their family has an island off the island of Kodiak, Alaska, and they homesteaded that. And they've done this, the family's fished for over 50 years. And you only go in the summer. And so I was pregnant with Alex and went up there. And during the summer, I wasn't feeling well, and I could
kind of thing. I was about 4 months pregnant, and I was kind of feeling like, oh, it's reminiscent of something that had happened several years before. Of course, I had a son in between that. So my son Matthew was there. We live in cabins on the beach, and we're the only people on the beach. And it's very isolated in Alaska. You do not have telephones. I mean, we don't have electricity. Everything's run off propane. So I'm kind of painting, I want you to understand that it's not like if you want to get an airplane, you have to radio and you ask Bubbles, is her name, to get the plane to come and get you, and you have to, and they're usually float planes. And so it's planes that land in the water.
That's why her name's Bubbles.
Yeah, well, and so and so you have to get a charter, and it's expensive. It's not something you just fly in and out of town. And the weather's really indicates a lot of our lives up there, and it's very cloudy and it's very rainy, and the seas are very, very. It's a very dangerous, job. And my husband had a toothache, and so he had already flown in. He'd actually gone in. So we have openings when you can fish, and the fishing game determine when you have openings and closures. And so you try to get as much, if you want to call them errands, done during closures, because you don't know when an opening and a closure is going to happen, because it all depends on how many fish go over the weir. Okay. So he's like, I'll run to town. I'll get my tooth fixed. And so that night I started really cramping really badly. And I thought, okay. And I was, bleeding. And I said to my sister-in-law, who was also pregnant, I said, we need to get a charter. I don't want to lose the baby out here. Okay. And it wasn't the point of like, I don't want to lose the baby. I just knew that it was to the point that it was past that. And so we found out that another family across the bay had gotten a charter. So we took it's a skiff, a boat, and we took it over and met them at our plane. But let me tell you what happened the night before. And remember, so I'm in my bed alone, and I'm, like I had mentioned, I'd never wanted to have dreams or anything about my mother, but that night, my mom came to me. And she looked about age 30, but she was very, very healthy. She wasn't the sick mom that I'd known. She was, and like I said, I don't really have memories. The only memories I have of my mother is when she was sick. But she looked so good and totally in white. And she said to me, something terrible is going to happen. She says, but don't worry. And she put her hand out, don't worry. She says, everything's going to work out fine. You're going to be okay. So I was like, oh, great. So we had bakeries and delis back home. And I thought, people would say, well, when she said that, didn't you first think about losing the baby? But I had already come to terms with the baby's already gone. I just need to get to the hospital to, have the DNC and all the other things that happen when you have a miscarriage. And so my thought went directly to my store and my employees, or, something bad's going to happen. And so I was all the more, Cherie, and then so I decided I would take my little boy that was 2 with us. So we called across the bay and said, can we share the charter? And so this pilot is a family friend that we've known for years. And there's kind of a saying in Alaska, if Dave Oberg will fly, it's okay to fly. But if Dave won't fly, don't get in the plane. So Dave came, and we went across the bay, and it's, boats don't go. You think you see them speeding along. Boats don't go as fast as they appear in the water. And it took us a little bit longer to get there. So we were late by like 15 minutes. But we did get in, and we take off from the water. And the weather was kind of choppy. It was, and those small planes, there's visual instrument reading, and then instrumental. They all fly visual up there, the Bush pilots. And it was a cargo plane. They call it a Beaver. And it's an old military cargo plane. So the captain, the pilot, the co-pilot, and then so the pilot and then there was the husband and wife. And what's interesting is the husband, who is also a pilot, didn't sit in the co-pilot seat. He sat to the left of me. And then my sister-in-law, and then myself, and then my son Matthew was draped, kind of sleeping across us. And we were not that far from town. So we had done the whole, you fly by what they call right at the ceiling. It's where you go right into the clouds, or you can see everything. And we got into some really bad, choppy weather, and it shot us right up into the clouds. And it was when you're in that, it's called 0-0 visibility. You can't see up, you can't see down, you can't. I mean, the pilot is just, I remember him just like looking like, where's the hole? Where do I guide the plane? Because we were actually descending to come down to get through there's a cut in the mountain to get into Kodiak. So we were surrounded by mountains.
Wow.
And I turned to my sister-in-law and I said, this plane's going down. And I've always tried to be really positive in my life, but I could see the pilot's face. And when you see, like, he's such a calm, easygoing guy, and he had the steering wheel. And when you fly a plane, you push in to go down and you push up to bring the plane up. And he had his hand and he was hugging that steering wheel as hard as he could to pull the plane up. But it didn't feel like we were getting any air to go up. And all of a sudden, it gets, so the same, feeling, the same, clouds are different. Clouds are patchy. Clouds are, you can see depth of high lows. This was just the same white sheer. And this, all of a sudden, the whole inside of the cockpit is filled with this white sheer. And I have to be honest, I woke up the next morning after that dream and I thought, oh, that's interesting. I've never dreamed about my mom. And I just didn't think another thing about it until at that moment. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is what she was talking about, that something terrible is going to happen. Because it was the same, I don't know, I deal with material, and so the texture of the feeling of the mist and everything, the feeling that I had when she came and talked to me, that is what was inside this plane. And when we hit, it took the floats off.
You hit the mountain.
Hit the mountain. It rips the floats off, and that, thank goodness, that's the gasoline. And so we skidded 1,200 feet. And then gravity pulled us down 1,800 feet. So we did like this, and it was bumpy. I don't remember all of it. But I'm telling you that you have to think of people were people screaming, people ask me, and I said, I've never felt such peace and quiet, and it was silent. It was just silent. And it felt to me, and I was confirmed by this, and I'll tell you a little bit in a minute, that I just thought, there are angels on the wings of this, because there is, from just guiding this plane. So you have to understand that by the time we stopped, we were from here, I want to say 20 feet from a cliff that would have dropped 1,800 feet down. There's no way we would have survived that.
So you landed on top of a cliff?
So we skidded up the mountain, and then when we went down, so the plane skid up, then the plane kind of went sideways, and so now we're skidding down on the wing.
Oh, man.
And the wing got stuck in the stream terminus of the mountain. That's where after water, that creates those little, and so the plane wing got stuck in that. But if the plane wouldn't have taken that turn and slid back, sideways down, we would have gone over that cliff of 1,800 feet. We would have never survived that. So I just believe that there were angels that were just guiding this plane. And, of course, to just a safe landing nonetheless. So the Coast Guard flies over, and it's patchy weather. It's 0 visibility, and all they can see is the wing of the plane. That's it. I mean, not the wing, the tail of the plane. And they radioed and they said, there's just no way there's survivors. There's metal all over the mountain. There's no way anyone survived this plane crash. So we're going to leave it alone. We're going to leave it overnight. And we consider this, what they call it rescue. And then after rescue, it's recovery.
Wait, so did that normally go off an assumption that everyone was dead?
Assumption that everyone was dead. Because remember, the history of this is there had never been an airplane crash, a bush plane crash in Alaska that anyone had ever survived, let alone all of us had survived. And we were the people in front were, I don't know what you want me to go into, but the windshield, I don't know if you are even old enough but windshields back in the day when they broke, now they have all that shatter stuff in. Well, when we hit, the windshield was just panes of glass, and it just basically sliced the pilot's face off. So, but what we found out after the plane when we landed, the plane was on fire. So all the electrical panel, it wasn't fire from gas, it was fire from the electrical panel. And, thank goodness that the gentleman that is a pilot was not sitting in the co-pilot seat, because this lady was hurt the very, very worst. He was sitting by the door and opened the door and got us all out while the plane was on fire.
So upon crashing, everyone was conscious?
Everyone was conscious.
What was it? What was everyone saying? What was the commotion?
What I was saying, it was just quiet.
Okay.
It was like I was saying, it was just the most peaceful.
So that was after the crash, not during the turbulence.
During the crash, nothing. It was just, and you would think that people would be going, screaming, yelling, and even the pilot, because now I have to be honest, I don't know if I passed out. I had a severe head injury. So, but my recollection, even I talked to my sister-in-law that was also in the plane crash with me. She's like, she says, Marci, it was just like holy. It felt holy.
The whole experience.
Yes. The whole experience felt totally like a holy experience. And she didn't know, and I don't even think I even told her about the dream about my mother. And so it wasn't until later that I said, I talked about, the dream that my mom had and coming to me and that everything would be fine. So a couple of weeks ago, I had a conversation with the pilot's wife. And he, years later, died in a different plane accident. Oh. And I wanted to talk to her and because I want to write this story about the bravery it was during the year of Exxon Valdez, the plane crash. And so when the Coast Guard flew over and they said, there's no one that survived, we're going to leave it until tomorrow. There's no reason to risk, our lives to try and rescue people that we perceive as dead. The pilot's best friend was flying helicopter for Exxon Valdez. And he said to his captain or whatever, said, you know what, my friend's been in a plane crash, and I know that he would try and save that plane. I'm going to go find him. And he literally took that. And I just think that even when I hear the experience of what he did to try and find us, and now think about it, 0 visibility. When I say you can't see 10 feet in front of you, you can't not. There is nothing past 10 feet. And he got in his helicopter and he used, and I wish I could say the right word, but it's an echo, whatever. And he would fly up the mountain, and he was looking for plane parts. And then he eventually found plane wreckage, and he found us and then radioed and said, they're all alive.
He got close enough to see you.
Yes. Well, he found us, and I'm telling you, he looked like a GQ. He looked like a Ralph Lauren model coming through that mist. I mean, I said, oh my gosh. He had one of those rugby shirts with the stripes back in the day, and he walks through, and I'm like, Cherie, is that like a dream? And she's like, no, that's Mike Machowski. Because she was from Kodiak. She knew everybody. Yeah. And I said, what's he doing here? And I'm like, oh my, he was just so handsome. But, and she says, I think he's here to rescue us. But so he said, first, how's Dave? And we're like, he's alive. Everyone's alive. And so he had a handheld radio, and he called the Coast Guard, and he said, everyone is alive. You have to come back. And we didn't. They only took 2 of us, and the rest, we had spent the night. They didn't rescue us until the next day.
So who else?
Me and my son and Cherie and Mike Machowski. So you have to remember we're on this cliff, and so the Coast Guard is dropping bags of tents, food. We have no food. We have nothing. And the bags you can see through the clouds, when you drop something in the swirling, and they would just pass right through us. They were missing the mark. And so the only thing that got was 2 tents and 2 hypothermial bags.
And that's pretty important with the bags, right?
The hypothermial bags and the tents are pretty important. So that was the only thing, no food, nothing. And so he put the tents, but first they came and they got Dave and Afton off the mountain and took them into Anchorage to get medical attention. But we spent the night there. Then the next morning the weather was bad, and he's like, you have to come get these. I mean, I thought I was losing my baby, and
you're pregnant this entire time.
Yeah, and I was pregnant. I was pregnant with Alex, my daughter, this whole time. And then my son, Matthew was with us. And so
how old was he again?
He was 2.
So I thought you said that.
He was 2.
What's going on with him as a 2-year-old?
Yeah, a 2-year-old. I think they don't quite register what, is happening. And Dave, like I said, I remember a lot I don't remember. So I broke my back and I had a severe head injury. So, but the things I do remember, is taking care of the pilot. His face, of course, he was cut off. And so I asked him if it was okay if I took, because that's traumatizing to a 2-year-old. I said, do you mind if I just put a Kleenex over your face? So, and he said, yes, that's fine. But in his journal, when I was talking to his wife the other week, we talked about it, and I said, Kathy, I really believe that angels were there protecting that plane just by sheer how we crashed, the plane going, 1,200 feet and then coming down 1,800 feet and sticking at the wing in the stream terminus, the way that I've always believed that angels were there, and that, the night before I told her about having that dream about my mother telling me that something terrible would happen, but everything would be fine. And she was so serious. And she told me some other things that I had to do. And I don't know if you wanted me to go into it, but that I needed to go and talk to my grandfather and talk to my grandfather about some things. And I needed to talk to my father about some things, very specific things.
But at the time you had the dream, did you just take it as a dream?
I just took it as a dream.
And didn't come to until that moment in the plane?
At the plane, I knew that it was more than a dream.
Like, shit, this is real.
That is real. That is more than real. And I just believed that it wasn't just her. It just felt like, I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like there was probably 100 angels guiding that plane. What's
your opinion? Because first of all, it's remarkable. I'm so happy you're still with us and everyone on that plane.
Thank you.
The fact that, that was the only plane to date that has survived the crash in that area of Alaska, or is it Alaska history?
In Bush, they have regular, there's different kinds of aviation, so you have commercial air and private air, and then there's Bush pilots.
Right.
And these Bush pilots, basically their job is to, carry gear and cargo to and from, because there's just a lot of remoteness in Alaska. And so this was basically a cargo plane. But he was our friend, and I trusted him as a pilot. So he would do charters for our family.
Well, what is your opinion on when this is the first plane like that to have survived a crash like this? And, you had that experience prior that said everything was going to go in. So it can feel like and be defined as some kind of intervention in many ways. And you explain having angels under the wings. What is your perspective on the fact that you all came out alive like that? And there was some, perhaps your belief system says there was an intervention.
Yes.
how does that compare to all the other times and the people that didn't have intervention? You know what I mean? What is the meaning
it's
of
very
that?
interesting. I just, people will say, well, God has a plan. People will say that. And I'm thinking, especially when you lose your mom so young, and you're like, so God has a plan, and God's plan was to take my mom away from 6 children, and I've dealt with a lot of loss in my life. And so, my best friend when I was 8 years old had jumped into the pool in Death Valley and died, hit her head. So I was like, so is that's God's plan? I've always been taught that, there's a higher power, that whatever the design is. And I don't know if I have, I have to believe that there's a reason that everything happens. And I've lived my life.
You have to, or you do?
I just do.
Okay.
Because I've lived a very, very full and wonderful life. And I don't know if it was that, and my thinking was, it could be worse. I could be dead. Okay, it's a miracle that I'm even here. So all of the pain that I have endured with my accident and recovery, even in my marriage that was really abusive, shall we say, I said, what's the lesson? What is the lesson to be learned in this situation? What is the lesson here? I think that everything is so loss. Why were we so blessed by angels and somebody else not being?
That's the thing. I hear the chirping in the back of the ear. People already saying, well, that wasn't intervention. That was just, they got lucky that the plane did so.
I cannot, it was definitely not luck.
Even the pilot. I'm not saying it was. I'm just,
right. But even the pilot addressed this to his wife and said, and I didn't share that experience with him, but in his journal, and he wrote 2 journals, and she's sending those because I plan on, for years I've wanted to write a book, and I just haven't buckled down to do it because there's so much that goes into the story. But even the pilot said he knew that there was a angelic intervention.
There's 3 of you. Someone else said that too? Or it was him the whole time? You mentioned someone else said the exact same thing.
That he was just telling his wife.
Got it. Okay, I understand.
Yeah, Kathy, his wife, told me. Because what I would like to do is to talk about the story of this friend that came to his best friend's aid, and because
the Ralph Lauren model.
Yeah, the Ralph Lauren model.
Put him right on the cover.
I would love to find. We're trying to find him. So, because I think that's brave. It's brave to go into unknown. I mean, he's maybe flown that mountain a million times, let's say, but when you can't see where you're flying, and you've been told that there's no way there's any survivors. So this is a little interesting tidbit. So the only thing that was, they do this with planes too, that the only thing that was left that they could salvage off the plane was the tail. So the tail was, parts, like car parts. Mm-hmm. So 2 years to the day, and my first husband was also a pilot, and so we were at fish camp, and he says, do you hear that? He says, that's another beaver flying over. And I said, how? And he was just so good, he knew every plane, everything about planes, da-da-da-da-da. And he says, it's another beaver. He's like, it's the Swedish fisherman coming. And I said, oh, okay, whatever, And so 2 years to the day and 500 feet away, as the fishermen were going back into town, they crashed.
What?
And they all died.
Like what?
With the tail of our plane on their plane.
So they landed at the exact same spot?
500 feet away.
And they all died?
And they all died.
So 2 years to the day.
2 years.
Another plane crashed.
Another plane that had taken the tail off of our plane and put it on that plane. Parts is parts, right?
Oh, man.
Carrying the Swedish fishermen. Because, it's a small community. People know when they're coming and going, and he knew it was the Swedish fishermen coming.
What is that about?
I have no idea. I said, the Swedish fishermen. I'm like, how did you know that? And then we later found out that plane had crashed July 13th.
2 years after.
2 years after.
Using the same tail of the plane that you crashed.
Same tail as our plane. So.
Did you think about that? Or
obviously no angelic intervention there, right? So I don't know what the difference is between my experience and their experience. And when people are called home or to another I don't know, what everyone's beliefs,
whatever it
is. But I believe that, that we were saved. There's absolutely no reason that we should have survived that airplane crash.
So what meaning do you give it? I know you said that you felt there was some kind of intervention.
I just think, I don't know. It's interesting. When I tell my story, I tell, because I had to work so hard I had a 1.5 second memory. I had very, very bad short-term memory. And so like the phone would ring and, I'd answer it and have a complete conversation. My husband would say, "Who was that?" And I'd say, "I don't know."
Wow.
"What did you talk about?" "I don't know." And for years and years, and I have what's called learned memories. Like you tell me, like my sister will say, "Remember when we were kids and da-da-da," and I don't remember that. But now you've told me, so I start like this cinematograph, whatever. Cinematic. Here you go. Cinematic stories going on in my head about, this and this and this happened. So now to me, it's a learned memory.
So you survived a plane crash and you've seen all these other people not survive, similar plane crashes. What does that change your perspective on life or death for that matter?
Well, I believe that you have to really live every day in gratitude. I mean, I'm grateful that I'm here. It hasn't been easy, but what a blessing.
Yeah.
And my daughter survived.
Yeah, that's another thing we've kind of brushed over.
Yeah, my daughter survived, and my sister-in-law was pregnant at the same time.
And your daughter, came about with these
gifts.
So, I mean...
Yeah.
And do you have I'm sorry if you said this before, and I'm mistaken if I'm being redundant, but your family has or does not have a history of having these gifts like your daughter?
No, and I would say not. My grandmother was really good. She liked to read faces and say, this person, this person. I never really thought anything of it. I just thought, that's crazy grandma. She would look at people and go, he doesn't clean under his bed.
Okay.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah, we're not that's a little different there. Yeah.
So I was, I always thought it was just my crazy grandmother.
So there was no prior beliefs. There's no prior beliefs.
Absolutely not.
Of you guys saying this is yes or no, like not believing it or not believing it. There's nothing before your daughter.
Oh, believing in an afterlife?
I mean, just in general, because, it goes either way. Some people believing that they can see the other side or not. So
there's no one in my family that has ever said that they have been able to see spirits or communicate with the other side.
And you grilled your daughter pretty hard to find out.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, and I would do the same thing.
It's not, when they're children. So,
yeah, so what is their MO?
You don't want your children to think you don't trust them.
Right.
I didn't want her to think that she was a liar. Mm-hmm. That's pretty out there, right? So,
I handled that very gracefully then.
But I think but I do believe that it's a gift. I think that we're all born with gifts. And, so she should exercise those gifts. And it's given a lot of comfort to a lot of people.
How old is she now?
It's 32.
Okay, so it's not too far from it. Is she actively doing this on a regular basis?
Not really.
Has it become an interference in her life, or she?
She says, "Mom, when you see the good, you see the bad as well."
What bad has she seen? Is that something you can speak of?
These spirits that, when you see good spirits, there's also you see bad spirits.
What are these bad spirits doing? What makes them a bad spirit?
Their intention.
Are they interfering with our material life?
Yeah, she would. Yes, yeah. They cause disruption.
What kind of disruption?
In even to the terms of being possessed by bad spirits. Am I getting really heavy?
No. This is heavier the better.
No. So she's experienced a lot of really. Going to graveyards is very difficult. So I don't enjoy doing that. It's something that she doesn't like to do. So, but what's interesting is that my father died 15 years ago, and I'm a procrastinator. That's me, procrastinate. And she came to me and she said, Grandma came to me last night and said that she's coming to get Grandpa when the wind is very, very loud. And I was like, well, it blows in Vegas like crazy. It's my logical brain. I'm very,
I get it.
Analytical. I said, that could be any day. And she says, Mom, you have 5 days And I said, 5 days. And what she explains, and Tara probably knows more, that time for them is very different than time for us.
Time on the other side.
Time on the other side is very, very different. And so for her to say 5 days, it gives me chills right now, because I know that 5 days. Now you have to understand that my dad was not even at the hospital. I did not even know how sick my dad had, cancer of the prostate. We didn't know. No one in my family knew. And so she says, there's some paperwork that you have to get signed. So I went to the trust attorney and I said, I got to get this paperwork. He's like, yes, you do. You've been putting it off. You need to get, we got to finish your dad's trust. So I go, and my dad, when I called, he said, I can't go because I can't get out of bed. And I said, what's wrong, Dad? And he says, there's no way I'm going to meet you at the bank. So I went and I found a notary that would drive there. I met, my dad signed the papers. So then that was on a Thursday. And by Sunday, he was in the hospital. We had to take him to emergency. And then he was gone 2 days after that.
So 5 days. Mm-hmm. What happened with the wind?
Well, it was very windy. But can you imagine if my mother wouldn't have come to my daughter and said that, I wouldn't have had the paper signed, and I would have had more problems with my dad's trust than I would ever. And so the night that he was going to pass, she said, my sister stayed, and she says, no, Mom, you're coming home with me tonight. And I said, I wasn't really counting the days, because you have to remember, I'm still like in this, it's just Alex saying stuff. And so on the way home, she says, tonight's the night.
It sounds similar in regards to your dream, where it happened, but then it took a little bit for it to click.
Yeah. And so, and maybe that, I don't know if that's just because of I don't know what that is.
Oh, man. I mean, I can imagine how that's comforting in many ways. In regards to, especially, you mentioned how you don't have a lot of memories of your mom. So you do have a unique experience with getting through grief in that sense, because it seems like out of all people that would need that, it sounds like someone in your situation.
Well, most definitely. And I've had some really very interesting things happen even lately with my father's trust. And I just know that they are here. And like I said earlier, I've always pushed it away because of the traumatic thing that happened when I was younger. And I didn't want to have any spirits, anything around me, any good, bad, didn't matter. I just didn't want to have encounter any of that.
Did you tap into that experience that you had? I know you mentioned it, but
the one recently about my father's trust?
You said there was something when you were a kid, right?
Oh, yeah, that was really bad.
Is that something with the other side?
Yes.
So you have had a lifetime of these experiences popping in.
But I wouldn't want anyone to have to experience that.
Okay.
It was bad, and I'm a very spiritual person. I'm not a strict religious. I don't judge, and I am very open to how people believe in all aspects. And so, but because of that experience, for years, I would not pray on my knees because it was bad.
Do you prefer to skip over that part?
If you want me to talk about it.
If you're comfortable, I'm curious. I'm interested, but I don't want to open up anything that you don't want to talk about.
I don't know what you want. No, I can talk about whatever.
Yeah, please.
So that's why I just mentioned this to Tara, because I think because of this situation, I did not want to ever have visitations from my mother, even though I desperately missed her.
Right, you mentioned that earlier.
We were very, very close. But I had served a mission for my church, and on that mission, you're teaching people about Christ, and so we pray for these families, right? And so I was praying at night for this family that we were teaching, and as I was praying, I was all of a sudden, I find myself face down on the ground, and I cannot move. And it is the force, and it felt like tons of weight was on me, and I could not move. I tried to scream for help. I could not. Nothing would come out of my voice, and it was just. And so the next day, the gentleman, because we were teaching them, and we wanted them to, of course, be baptized, and so we were communicating, and I mean, it was frightful, so frightful that I called elders from my church to come over and give me a special, like a blessing, because it was just so, I felt like I was not being strangled. But like when you can't talk, when you can't scream, when there's nothing that is coming out of you and you don't understand why that's happening. Like, how could this be happening? And I'm not one that watches that. I don't watch scary movies. I don't, all this stuff so I was just like, what is going on here? And then my companion comes in and she's like trying to get me up off the ground, and she can't budge me off the ground. And I'm like, saying, help me. And so eventually, and then we were staying with a lady, and we finally, and I honestly can't remember how I got off the floor, but we were now in her bedroom, the older woman's bedroom. But because of that instance, and then the next day, I was talking with a gentleman, and he asked me how my evening went. And I was like, my evening? And then I realized that what was going on. And he's like, he basically, what he said is, we put a spell on you last night.
Wait, who was this person saying that?
This family that we were teaching. They were part of, I don't want to mention religions, because I don't want someone that's of that faith to think that I'm saying bad things about their faith. But It was just, and I was like, you what? And, he's like, yes. He says that, it was a black magic spell. And
did you believe him?
Well, I can't understand what happened, but when he said that, I knew that whatever it was the darkest experience of my life. And it was bad energy. And for me to resolve in my mind that I would never pray on my knees again, right?
So you started off mentioning that you don't identify as religious, but I
am religious. I am.
Okay.
I am. I'm very spiritual and religious, but I don't. Religious in the fact that I don't judge. I'm not going to judge how people believe or think or
whatever they.
Yeah, whatever you do you, and I'm very happy to support whatever that is.
I've never tapped into that. I don't know what I believe in regards to spells and stuff. What do you? What the hell? What's that? How do you define that?
Well, in talking with it, so I told you that we called these elders to come over, and I was just mortified, and they said this is common in this region, white magic, black magic.
What region is this?
In Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
In the Ozarks.
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah. And he says, this is what's happened. And, after this man kind of talking to me and he was very you could tell that he was up to no good. And of course I said, well, you know what? We're no longer going to teach your family, and you come, whatever you decide to do with your life is great.
How do you cast a spell?
I don't know. But they say it's common.
I need to look. I'm going to look into that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
There's white magic and black magic.
Do you know about this? I'm talking to Tara off the mic. She's been on the podcast a couple times.
I know about it, and I can see now that he was not just what we would call a hard sell in sales, but he was trying to mess with these, probably very innocent, sweet missionaries, and probably thought, maybe some background thinking, because where they were from, they were going to push a religion where he had been used to his own.
Well, gonna
not only not really get baptized like they were trying to help him do, but probably try to test her faith or.
It sounds like a Netflix documentary.
Between different denominations issue.
Yeah, he came to a baptism the night before, and because he says, well, you don't, your religion, your faith, you don't speak in tongues. And I'm like, no, because the way we view speaking in tongues is speaking different languages, like audible, understandable languages. Now, when speaking in tongues, that you don't understand what they're saying.
Yeah.
And so when he came to the baptism and we didn't speak in tongues, he's like, it's not for me. You guys didn't speak in tongues. And I'm like, okay,
man.
That's cool. And then that night, when we were just closing the night, praying for this family, and this happened, I didn't know that's what it was until the elders, I told him what happened. He's like, someone's put a black magic spell on you.
What would your rational brain say? Like, obviously, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, real or false. I'm just saying, because remember you mentioned earlier about your rational brain trying to decipher the dream.
I couldn't understand how my physical body I was on my knees.
You were paralyzed.
I was paralyzed.
I
could not move at all.
I mean, is there even I don't know. I have no idea. That's wild.
And then when my companion, there's two of you, a girl's companion, came to help me off the floor. She couldn't. I mean, now she's probably taller than me, thinner than me, but she couldn't budge me.
Yeah.
I couldn't, and I could not understand that. So when the people from my church came and said, "Oh, well, he's put a magic spell on you, a black magic spell on you," I was like, "What is that?" I mean, I had never even heard such things. And he says, "That's very common in this region. Just want you to know." And I don't know if he was saying that to calm me, but it scared, the shit out of me.
I mean, if someone said it was common, I don't think that would calm me down. Then you get the next one.
Yeah, it just scared me to the point that if we pray every day, morning and night, this girl doesn't get on her knees because of it. It's just very frightening.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
So, like I was telling Tara, that's why when, people say, well, wouldn't you like to see you have a visitation from your mother? No.
After that?
Nope. Nope. Don't want it. I miss her desperately, but I don't want anything to do with the good or the bad.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
I just want to be left alone.
Whatever that was terrifying.
Yeah, it was terrifying.
That's the
but
thing.
What was so interesting is when my mom came to me, I would think, because of my past, I would have been mortified. I would have been like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But I wasn't. It was just like, oh my gosh, Mom, what?
It was more pure?
Yeah, just pure and just, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like a holy experience.
Whew. Man, I don't even know where to go from there. That was a curveball.
Oh, sorry.
No, don't say sorry. This is interesting to me. It's just
there's just lots of experiences that that.
That's remarkable. I'm glad you're tapping into the good stuff now.
Yeah,
it's beautiful
that
you didn't want to tap into that, but now you're tapping into that indirectly through your daughter. And
definitely,
at the end of the day, if it feels good and it's helping you during your process,
brings a lot of peace. And
that's beautiful. Then.
People that it's interesting that my father just recently passed away. And no, not my father, my children's father. So my first husband just passed away. And even though my children have been raised in a home a certain way, my children have very, very diverse understandings of the life after this, where it brings me peace to know that their father is there helping them and guiding them. And if you want to, I won't say manipulating, but I've seen how the other side has helped in finding things and that I've been looking for years, and then all of a sudden, I mean, they're there, and I've looked in the same place again and again, just different things. And I think
material things,
yes,
like items?
Material things, yeah. And so just talking with the kids, and when they say, I just don't, their heart is so broken over the death of their father. And as they say, my one son, I don't believe that there's anything after this. I just think he's gone. But do you see, for me, I'm comforted, but for him, he's lost. And he's like, Mom, I don't think that you're silly. And it's not that I don't believe that you've had all of these experiences. He says, I just can't. Science can't prove it.
Right. That's fine.
And I said, well, and you do you, Matt. It's okay.
That's great. You're not, you're.
And he was in the plane crash with me.
Yeah. Isn't that remarkable?
And totally different, come out of that experience with totally different, mindsets and feelings.
Yeah, it's so interesting that the diverse, but that's even more interesting because you had that experience and all these stories you've shared, yet he's just going in a different direction.
Totally different.
And it just makes me think, I'm like, well, are we all right, or is are a lot of us wrong? You know what I mean? It's like, we're going to find out one or the other.
And so I say to him, he's like, whatever, Mom, I just don't feel it. I just can't. I said, don't you feel that like your father has anything to do, the summer this year, they're not going to fish camp. Mm-hmm. And fish camp's been fished every year for 50 years, and they didn't go this year. And for a variety of reasons. And I said, you know what? I believe that your father, it's in the details, Matt, why you didn't go this year, and it's okay. And we'll find out why later. But for whatever reason, and I just feel like your father's like got a hold of this. So don't worry. And, you know, he's logical. Well, whatever, mother, you know, if that's how you want to, you know. But I said, you know, one day, Matt, you'll see.
One day we're definitely going to see.
One day, right?
Not see, I don't know.
I said, either you're going to be right or a lot of other people are going to be right.
That's what I'm saying. But at the end, regardless, we're going to find out, or we're not going to find out because you won't know.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't know which is better, to be honest. Part of me thinks, maybe if I didn't know this, it's like, I can kind of rest, but I won't even know I'm resting. So it freaks me out in a way.
And see, death has always been I am totally afraid of it.
Of death?
Of death, totally.
Even after all this? No.
After all of this, yeah. Because I try to explain to my daughter, even Alex is afraid of death. Even with what she can do, knowing.
What's she scared of?
What we came down to is that here on Earth, you know, today's today, and we don't know what today is after this life.
So she doesn't per se know what happens after we die. She just connects to the other side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, something's happening.
Know. Something's happening.
So she believes in her gifts, so therefore she knows something's going on, but she just doesn't know what that entails.
Well, it's like the day-to-day, like, what do we do? Do we have jobs? Do we, you know?
I mean, not. Yeah. I get paid friggin' good if we're working over there, so that's all I got to say.
Exactly. So I think it's just that is the unknowing of that, but definitely
the acceptance of unknowing, and you know, one day we're going to find out or we're not.
But she says obviously something, because what I see, you know, and so I've experienced it, and it's real.
I don't know what's real anymore. Marci, I want to thank you. That was a very exciting conversation. I think we tackled a lot of things. A couple things at the end I didn't know we were going to get into, which is awesome. Oh. You know, it's going to make me think about some things. So I appreciate you being here and sharing that. I think it's incredible. I'm so happy you're here. Yeah. Like here and here. You know what I mean?
Here, exactly. Here. Thank you.
And it's a fantastic story. So I really appreciate you being here.
It's an honor. So
likewise, it goes both ways. I'm happy you're sitting in front of me. So guys, thank you. Another episode of Dead Talks. Till next time. And thank you, Marci.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Dead Talks. Please do not forget to hit the subscribe button and also the notification bell. That'll give you updates as to when we post a new video, more episodes, and more content in general. We are streaming on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and all that. And also find us on Instagram at Dead Talks Podcast or www.deadtalks.net. Thank you so much.